everyone. Thank you for coming on to this webinar and joining me. If we haven't met before, I'm Beth Laws and I'm a technical consultant here at Somerford Associates. Just to take a quick look at what we're covering today, firstly, we're going to be going through a brief overview of what we do at Somerford Associates and who we are. As some of you just might not be familiar with us, we've got a brief overview of Varonis DA Cloud and what it does. And then I'm going to be touching on the reasons why Salesforce is such a common target. And then after that, I'm going to be going through some of the use cases of DA Cloud for Salesforce, so you can really get to know some of the features of it and really see how this can give security teams a unique overview of Salesforce. Then I'm going to show you a quick demonstration of the DA Cloud user interface itself. So you're going to be able to see what the platform actually looks like. And then just before we come to the end, I'll speak about the free Salesforce assessments you can get. And of course, if any questions come through, we'll go through those. So who are Somerford Associates? So we're a leading provider of technology solutions and services, and we're also a certified platinum partner with Varonis. We're one of the go-to partners for expertise across some of the UK's largest companies. So that's across a range of different industries and even for some government agencies as well. And as consultants, we're very customer focused and we understand both the business and information management challenges faced by organisations today. Our professional services team is comprehensively trained in every one of our solutions we offer, and they work closely with all of our customers to meet their specific requirements. We also have an in-house support desk as well for our customers, and actually over 95% of cases that do come through to our support desk, they are solved in-house without the need to escalate these further to the vendors. So Varonis, it's helped many customers to monitor, protect and manage their data. Varonis adopts the methodology of detect, prevent and sustain to help customers succeed with their data journey. And now that with DA Cloud, they're helping customers to protect their data within the cloud. So DA Cloud, it's used to detect insider threats and unusual account activity. It then looks to prevent any disasters by ensuring sensitive data is locked down appropriately by helping to identify where data is overexposed and accessible to people that it shouldn't be. So as I've said, we are going to be focusing on Salesforce today, but just to tell you guys about DatAdvantage Cloud in general first. DA Cloud, it was a new product released by Varonis back last year, so in 2021, and most of you will know that the pandemic, it really accelerated businesses choosing to adopt cloud applications or services, and a lot of organizations are now storing a mass amount of data throughout their cloud applications. And often it is the case that the organizations struggle to actually know who has access to this and how much of that data in the cloud is sensitive, and this is where DA Cloud can help. So there are many different cloud applications it can work with. Just to name a couple for now, there's Google Drive, Box, AWS. Obviously, we're going to be talking about Salesforce. So much like Varonis for your on-prem data stores, for those of you who are familiar with it, DA Cloud allows you to see who has access to data, helping to understand, whether this is overexposed. It can also classify your data, so allowing you to know what type of sensitive information you've got stored within there. And it can also monitor user behavior and then alert on any suspicious behavior. So it really can make life a lot easier when it comes to looking at the story behind those alerts when trying to conduct cross-cloud investigations. So just to touch more on the cloud repositories that DA Cloud works with, before we move on to looking specifically at Salesforce. So firstly, we've got the collaborative data repositories like Google Drive and Box. So these are like your classic data stores where you've got files and folders, and you know, users have got access to these, but we've got an increased risk here with these due to things like collaboration links that can be shared with other users, and these can even be shared with external users as well. But similar to the Varonis data security platform, DA Cloud is looking at that access activity and helping security teams to understand the different levels of access users have across these platforms, you know, and classifying that content of the data alongside those alerting capabilities. Okta is another big one we've got on the slide here. So Okta, this is a single sign-on platform. So basically, this allows you to sign into other applications once you're signed into your Okta account. So it's really critical to be keeping this one safe and making sure that an attacker doesn't get their hands on this. Another big one is AWS. So DA Cloud can work with IAM subservices, S3 storage, EC2 instances. We've also got the Slack logo here. So Slack is a communication channel, but we've seen that there's actually a lot of data that gets stored in here, and sometimes mistakenly it is shared with other users as well, and that can even be external users. So another one we've got is Jira. So this is often used within projects. So normally it's used as a project tracking tool, but often within here there can be sensitive project information stored there. We've also got Zoom on here as well. So Zoom, I'm pretty sure you'll all have heard of. So this Zoom grew massively once, you know, the pandemic hit, and just because, you know, lots of people were then suddenly working remotely and, you know, attending calls and meetings online. So DA Cloud can actually help monitor who actually attended those meetings and who is sharing any meeting recordings, and, you know, what roles different users have within Zoom. Have I covered them all there? Oh, I think the other one I haven't mentioned is GitHub. So GitHub is another sort of cloud store, but it's used more for for code repositories. So this could be production code you've got stored in there potentially, you know, so it's important to be protecting that. If anyone is wondering as well, DA Cloud is a cloud hosted solution itself, so a SaaS solution, and I believe it's hosted on AWS in the US East region. So moving on to be talking about Salesforce more specifically now, and looking at why Salesforce is such a common target. So one of the reasons attackers go for Salesforce is because, you know, it's one of the biggest CRMs on the market, and it's used by over 150,000 organizations. And with it being a CRM, this means that there's going to be all sorts of different information which could be stored in there. So we're talking about things like contract data and pricing documents. There's going to be personal information and things like notes about potential leads and all sorts of really sensitive information in there. And this is often information which is really important to the sales teams, and some of this information could be business critical. So because it's a CRM, this often means that the security and IT teams have little or sometimes no visibility of what's in Salesforce and who has access to this and so on. And, you know, even in some big organizations, they might even have a dedicated Salesforce team to be looking after it. And, you know, if that is the case, that often means that the Salesforce admins, they aren't people who are necessarily thinking about security and thinking about how we're protecting that data. And, you know, the IT and security teams, because they haven't got Salesforce on their radar, they're not then watching, you know, for attackers and thinking about protecting that information. And attackers, they seem to know this and take advantage of this. Also, sometimes there is a bit of a misconception that if your data is in the cloud, sometimes it's assumed that it is safe and secure, but that's not necessarily the case. So it's up to Salesforce to make sure that that infrastructure that they provide to host this, you know, in their data center It's up to them to make sure that it's secure, that's secure and protected, but it's really up to the customer to make sure that whatever they're putting inside Salesforce, it's up to them to make sure that this is only accessible to, you know, who it should be, who should be able to access that, and they also should be checking that they're actually able to respond appropriately if something unusual happens and, you know, perhaps an intruder's got in. On top of this, Salesforce has a very complicated permission structure, and it's not just administrators who can share objects and allow other users to have access. So normal users have the ability to do this. And ultimately, both of these together can mean that it's often that data in Salesforce is more exposed than Salesforce admins or, you know, those users actually realize. So that complex permission model I just mentioned, just to expand on that a little bit more. So it's really good in the sense of usability and flexibility, but it does mean that, you know, when you've got all these different options and ways you can configure users and, you know, even allow external users from outside your organization to have access, it means when you look at it from a security point of view, this can cause issues. And, you know, often people have got access to information and, you know, admins aren't realizing this. So in Salesforce, if an admin needs to understand what a user may have access to and, you know, what they can do in Salesforce, this can actually take them a while because they need to understand what profile that user's been granted, and then on top of that, they would have to understand which permission set they've been assigned. They'd also then need to look at the permission set group as well. And then after that, they would actually have to look at the object settings to see what objects they can actually access. And, you know, to do this, and admins, they've got to go through various tabs and screens to look at this, and they're going to have to be writing notes down about all these different permissions. And, you know, this can actually be just a really long task for those people. So there's really two main ways DA Cloud can help when it comes to Salesforce permissions. There is actually a feature which would be very useful for Salesforce admins as well as the security team. And, you know, this is helping to get around having to look at those multiple pages to try find out, you know, what a user can do and access in Salesforce. So DA Cloud can show you a Salesforce user's overall permissions in one screen. And you can even tell how they managed to obtain this permission as well. So on top of this, it can also show you a user's object and field levels and record permissions. So if you're trying to understand what an employee is able to do in Salesforce and access, it's going to make this process a whole lot easier. And Varonis have also just released a new feature as well. So this will actually allow you to compare two users' aggregated permissions in Salesforce side by side on the one screen, in the one screen. And then that second way, Varonis can help with these permissions and make that a lot easier, you know, to get your head around, is with their simplified CRUD's permission model. So how this works is Varonis normalizes the permissions. So this isn't the permissions just from Salesforce, this is the permissions from all the different cloud applications that it can work with as well. So cloud apps, they seem to all have different permission models with all sorts of different names and, you know, combinations of access levels, and sometimes trying to understand these can also eat up quite a bit of your time. So by normalizing these permissions and mapping these permissions to a much easier to understand model, so that's what they've called the CRUD's model, where CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete, and share. So this is useful when it comes to Salesforce, as there's so many different permissions, and security guys, if they don't have any involvement in Salesforce, they might not necessarily know what these permissions mean, and it makes it a lot easier for them to understand, whether a user can actually edit data or, not see this data at all, or, what they specifically can do with the data in Salesforce. As an example, it might be useful if, you had some GDPR data in Salesforce and that there's only certain people who, are required to have access to this. So it can help you to quickly understand what level of access the employees have to this data, and you can even export a report of this page too if that's what's needed. So moving on to just take a look at a few of the other ways DA Cloud can help with Salesforce. So if you're unaware of what type of data is in your Salesforce environment, Varonis can classify your data, and it's able to tell you whether it's sensitive or not. And not only that, it can actually tell you how the data is sensitive. So it's able to tell you what type of data is held within your files. So that could be, whether this is GDPR, PCI information, or financial data, or, whether something specific has been identified in there, such as a national insurance number. So for those of you familiar with the Varonis data security platform, you probably would have heard of the data classification engine. And now Varonis, they've brought that very similar technology to work with your cloud data. So Varonis Data Classification Cloud uses patterns, regular expressions, and dictionaries to identify the files that contain sensitive information that are of interest to your organization. It does come with predefined classification rules, but it is also possible to customize these and add organization-specific rules as well. So why is it important to be classifying that data? Well, once we have an understanding of what type of data we hold in our environment, and therefore knowing what is sensitive and needs locking down, and we need to look at rectifying any unnecessary access on those, Varonis believes a least privilege model is best practice when it comes to who is accessing that data, and that means you're going to be making sure that only the right people have access to that right data. So not all of what we hold is going to be sensitive. So by classifying it, it's helping you to understand where your priorities lie and what you need to be protecting first. So as well as classifying that sensitive data, Varonis is monitoring the access and activity on that data as well. Again, similar to Varonis for on-prem, it's monitoring user activity by pulling out logs from cloud applications, to then be able to alert on any suspicious behavior or, behavior which could be potentially malicious. DA Cloud has a large library of built-in alert models to be able to detect insider threats or external threats and, issue alerts to prevent cyber criminals accessing Salesforce. Some examples of these include alerts to detect users accessing an unusual number of Salesforce objects, changes to administrator accounts, or changes to sharing rules to be able to share records with guest users, and there's many other Salesforce specific threat models. It's possible to enable or disable these and make your own custom alert policies, to suit your business as best as possible, and to try and make sure that the alerts your security team are seeing are only the ones that they need to see. So the alerts, they're enriched with more contextual information, that really helps to tell that story of what this user or account has been up to then help security teams, understand, does this need prioritizing and does this need investigating further? So one problem CISOs have when an organization is using Salesforce, but they're also using multiple other cloud applications, is that there then becomes more and more individual cloud identities for users to keep track of. So a user could have an account for Salesforce, and then they could also have an account for Google, and then they could also have an Okta account, and then Jira, And this list could go on, and these are actually all unique identities with different usernames. So it's able to map these accounts together and map these back to a single person. And it does this by matching up things like first names and last names and telephone numbers and various other contact information linked to these accounts. But what this does mean is it's a lot easier to look at what a user's been doing across multiple cloud applications. So it's not just internal users this works for. It can also do this for external users, and it can even show you if a user's got any personal accounts that they've been using as well. So it does mean if you had an alert for some unusual behavior in Salesforce, for example, then DA Cloud's going to make it a lot easier to see what that same user's been doing in other cloud applications as well. This can also really help when it comes to offboarding employee accounts as well. With all these different cloud applications, it often goes that there are cloud accounts which are forgotten about and not necessarily disabled when an employee leaves the company. Varonis actually did a SaaS risk report in 2021, and they found that 3 out of 4 cloud accounts which belong to external contractors remained active after they had actually left the organization. So that's a lot of accounts which should have actually been disabled. DA Cloud means that you can see users have disabled accounts and when they still have accounts that are still active. So especially when it comes to Salesforce, because there's so much information in there. So, you've got information on sales leads and opportunities. It does mean it's really crucial that that information is no longer accessible for employees who have then left the company. So it does make it a lot easier to spot offboarding gaps with DA Cloud for cloud applications. So as an example, you could see that there's a user who has a Google account that's been disabled for a while now, and you could see they've got a Slack account that's also been disabled. But we could also see that they've got a Salesforce account, and this still seems to be, active and working. So then the next step would be to check, whether this employee is actually still working for the company or have they actually left. And then if that were the case, you then go ahead and, disable that Salesforce account. So with the cloud identity mapping and the CRUDS model, DA Cloud does make cross-cloud investigations a whole lot easier. It's not uncommon for businesses to be using not just one cloud application, but 3 or 4 or 5 of these. And it can be really difficult for CISOs and security teams to be performing investigations on users, and looking at their behavior across these different platforms without having to actually sift through, multiple pages of information and looking at all these different cloud logs and, then joining the dots together. And this can just be really time consuming. But DA Cloud can help by allowing you to see a user's activity across multiple cloud applications, all in this one single pane of glass. So a single user interface that's pulling together event logs and from all these different cloud applications and then normalizing them and enriching them with more contextual information about the users. So you're able to see, a single timeline for a given user to help summarize their activity across these multiple cloud applications. And ultimately that's going to be bringing down that investigation time. So I'm just going to take you through a very brief demonstration of the DA Cloud platform, focusing on what we can see regarding Salesforce in there. So let me just change my screen to bring up the demo environment for you. So you should be able to see the demo environment I've got up on the screen now. DA Cloud does have just the one interface. So for those of you that know Varonis for on-prem and Microsoft 365, there's a few different interfaces with that, but with DA Cloud, everything is here. So it's nice that it's just this one pane of glass where you can see everything together. I'm just going to show you a bit around the UI, just to see what it looks like and show you a couple of features. of it. So firstly, you can see on the page here, we've got the dashboard view. So this is the page you see when you first log on, and it's here to sort of summarize some of the key factors about your cloud environment. So you can see information on here about all your cloud stores and applications that DA Cloud is working with. So it's not just Salesforce information on here. So you can see we've got information about sensitive data by exposure. If I scroll down here, you can see all the connected services as well. So which services is DA Cloud working with? So you can see we've got Okta, got Google, Zoom, and then obviously we've got Salesforce too, which is what we're going to be looking at. So I just want to show you the alerts page. So let me just click on here to take a look. So this is where you can see all the alerts which have been triggered by Varonis's threat models coming from all your different cloud applications. As we're talking about Salesforce today, what we can do here is click on Add Filter and then head down to Services. And I'm just going to click on Salesforce here. And this is going to bring us back the Salesforce related alerts. So now you can see it's showing us just these alerts from Salesforce. So we've got some good examples here. There is this one. So this one here is Alan Kari has had his single sign-on account suspended, but there's been activity detected from him in Salesforce. Another one we've got as a different example is Alan has been excessively accessing Salesforce objects. So we can actually see a bit more information here and take a closer look at what Alan's been doing. So if I click down here on the show activity and just let that load, if I just expand this column here, so we can actually see what Alan's been accessing in Salesforce, which has then, triggered that alert. One thing you can also do from here is I can click on Alan's name up here to take a closer look at this account specifically for him. So, and I just want to head to the related identities and scroll down. So here you can see any other related cloud accounts that we have for Alan. So remember that I mentioned that DA Cloud, it maps all the different cloud identities back to an individual, person, so that specific employee. So you can see Alan's got an account for Okta. He's obviously got his Salesforce account. He's got his Gmail account, business account here for Google, sorry. And then he's also actually got a personal Gmail account on there. So that's identified that he's been using a personal account. If we wanted to know more about Alan's Salesforce permissions, we can click on the System Permission tabs here. And this is going to bring up this long list of permission names down here. And if we open one of these up, we're able to see more specifically what permissions he has been assigned. And if we hover over one of these, so if we take a look at this Chatter internal user permission, if I hover over this tick here, it actually shows me that he has been given this permission because he has the system administrator profile. So you can actually understand why he has been assigned that level of permission. One thing you can also take a look at from here is you can also see the field access and record access. So you can see we've got that CRUDS model displayed here. So where I mentioned that CRUDS was standing for create, read, update, delete, and share. So we're able to see, understand more clearly what level of permissions he's got here. The other thing I just want to show you is I did mention the data classification for cloud data. So if we head to the compliance tab at the top here, so you can see we've got various information about our sensitive data in our environment. But I'm going to specifically go down here and take a look at the Salesforce environment. So you can see PII, financial and PCI data has been identified in here. And if we just click on these arrows to expand this, you can actually specifically click on these here. And if we head to the compliance tab here, you can actually see what's specifically being identified in here. So you can see they've got birthday information that's been identified in here, and credit card information identified in there as well. So that really concludes the short demo part of the webinar. Let me just bring back my slide deck. So just before we come to the end, I just also want to mention the free risk assessments which are offered. So a risk assessment, it's a free assessment of your own cloud applications and services that Varonis and Somerford can provide. Many organisations, they're not aware of how much of their data is sensitive in Salesforce or where this lives and who has access to it. And this can really help to show you specifically where some of your weaknesses are and then make recommendations for minimizing your risks. So essentially this is where DA Cloud is linked up to your your cloud applications, so then it can watch your environment, and then the assessment comes with a report which will provide you with some statistics. So because DA Cloud is a SaaS solution, it's really quick and easy to get this set up and linked up with those cloud applications. Essentially, you'll be given a DA Cloud tenant, and then this tenant would then be connected to your Salesforce org, and we could connect this to any other cloud applications that would work with DA Cloud as well. So you can see on the slide here, we've got some examples of some of the information you might see in a report. So there's information about how much of your data is sensitive, or information about how much data has been shared with external users as a different example. So as I did already mention, the assessment, it is completely free, and that report you receive is completely free as well. So if you are interested in DA Cloud, it does really make sense to take advantage of getting a free assessment. And if this is something you're interested in, please get in contact with us and we can look at getting something set up for you. So you can email us at info@somerfordassociates.com, or you can head to our website to register for one of these. That does bring us to the end of the webinar, and please do free to get in touch with us if you do have any questions you think of. So you can email us. So again, that email was info@somerfordassociates.com. So thank you everyone for listening, and hopefully we'll be hearing from some of you. Thank you.